I never liked high school. The constant pressure, the nerve-wracking exams, the social hierarchy that ruled everything, and the drama. God, the drama. It got to a point where I thought about dropping out and traveling the world with nothing but a backpack and a camera. But eventually I decided to stick it out, knowing that getting my diploma was still my best shot at a better future. However, as much as I tried to avoid it, something sinister seemed to be brewing at the high school. At first, it was just whispers and strange rumors that circulated around the halls. I remember stopping by the cafeteria, feeling the blaring eyes of a group of seniors on me. It wasn't an uncommon occurrence as bullying was still rampant, but the intensity of their glares felt different. Then there were whispers from girls in the bathroom about someone seeing shadows and hearing footsteps in the abandoned art room. I thought it was just kids playing pranks or exaggerating to get attention. That is, until I experienced something myself. I was staying late after school, catching up on some homework in the common area. My laptop battery was almost dead, so I decided to head to the library and use a computer. As I walked down the dimly lit hallways, I heard what sounded like soft laughter behind me, but when I turned around, there was nobody there. I continued walking, my heart racing, and heard the laughter again, louder this time, definitely not in my head. I quickened my pace and finally reached the library. Panting, I turned on a computer and got lost in my work until I hear a faint tapping sound. I ignored it, thinking it was probably just someone working on a project or trying to get my attention. The tapping continued, getting louder with each repetition until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I turned around, expecting to see a student or a teacher standing there, only to find myself face to face with a pale, emotionless woman dressed in black. I stumbled back, dropping my laptop, and ran as fast as I could towards the exit. I didn't look back until I was safely outside, gasping for air. I never went back to the school after dark. The haunting experience had left me shaken to the bone. I spent the rest of the week trying to piece together what had happened and asking around to find any information about the phantom woman in black. But everything fell short, and it only added to my fear and confusion. The next week, as I walked towards my locker, a new poster caught my eye. It was a picture of the woman I had seen in the library, dated 1963. The headline read, "The Ghost That Haunts Our Halls, the Rita McCrossan Story." I felt my knees weaken as I read Rita's story. She had been a shy, introverted art student that had become the victim of a senior prank that had gone terribly wrong. She had been locked inside the school's art supply closet as a means of hazing, but nobody returned to let her out. In her desperation, she tried to burrow her way through the door. It wasn't until 5 days later, when the school had closed for the weekend, that they found her body, curled up and barely alive behind the door. The incident had caused quite the scandal, and the school tried to forget it with minimal mentions of what had happened. So here I was, 60 years later, experiencing the aftermath of a horrible crime that had gone unpunished. I made the vow to let it go and not meddle with things that were best left untouched. But as the days turned into weeks, I found myself drawn closer to Rita and her tale, which grieved my innocent heart. Eventually, amidst the apathy, pressure, and prejudice of high school, I found myself identifying with Rita. And on the night of my graduation, as everyone partied away their worries and triumphs, I found myself quietly traversing the empty halls. I was making my way towards the art room when something stopped me, or someone. As I whirled around, I found Rita standing before me once again, but this time she was smiling with a grace and beauty that glowed in the dim light. "Thank you for not forgetting me." Her voice floated sweetly, weaving in and out of the silence and emptiness. Tears prickled in my still Sue. I thought high school was supposed to be the best years of my life, but mine turned into a waking nightmare. I would like to think that my experience was an anomaly, but from what I gather, it was only a small part of a much larger problem. I came to realize that something sinister was lurking in the halls of my high school, and I wasn't alone in that fear. It started on my very first day. I was nervous and excited to be starting this new chapter. I was heading to my first class when I saw her. Her name was Sarah, and she looked lost, like she didn't know her way around. I offered to help, and that's when I noticed a strange mark on her wrist. It was a symbol that I'd never seen before, and it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. As it turned out, Sarah and I had several classes together, and we quickly became friends. But something about her was off. She would sometimes zone out in the middle of class, and she would look terrified and anxious when it happened. But whenever I asked her what was wrong, she shut down and refused to talk about it. One day, I decided to follow her after school. She led me to an abandoned part of the school tucked away behind the gym. It was a place that I'd never been before, and it smelled musty and stale. When we reached a door that led into the basement, she turned to me with a look of fear in her eyes. "Listen," she said. "If you want to leave, do it now. If you come in with me, you'll never be the same." I didn't know what she meant, but I decided to follow her anyway. As we descended the stairs into the basement, I heard the sound of chanting. It was coming from behind one of the doors, and it made my blood run cold. We entered the room, and what I saw there still haunts me to this day. It was a group of students, all dressed in black robes, standing around a circle of flames. In the center of the circle was a book, and I recognized the same symbol from Sarah's wrist on my own classmates' robes. The chanting grew louder and more frenzied, and I recognized some of the students from my classes. They were all staring at me and Sarah, and the fear in her eyes was mirrored in my own. One of the students stepped forward, and he was holding a knife. Sarah begged him to stop, but he only laughed and said it was all part of the ritual. It was then that I knew we had to make a run for it. Together, Sarah and I bolted up the stairs and out of the basement. We ran until we were out of the school and collapsed on the grass, gasping for air. We knew we had to do something, but we didn't know what. Eventually, we told a guidance counselor about the ritual cult, but she laughed it off as a prank or a rumor. No one would listen to us, and we were left feeling helpless and alone. But it wasn't until months later that the full extent of what had been happening at our school was finally exposed. A group of parents had grown concerned about their children's erratic behavior, and they'd hired a private investigator. What he found was horrifying. The cult at our high school was just one node in a larger network of similar groups across the country. They were working together toward some unknown goal, and they were using teenagers as their unwitting pawns. The cult was disbanded, and some of its leaders were arrested. But Sarah and I never forgot what we had seen. We never forgot the fear and the sense of impending doom that had hung over our high school. Even now, years later, we are haunted by the thought that something like that could ever exist in a place that's supposed to be safe for children. We'll never forget what happened, and we'll always be watching, waiting for the next dark secret to come to light. I never believed in the supernatural until I started high school. That was when everything changed, and I realized that when people say ghosts exist, there is no smoke without fire. Looking back, I realize now that I was too arrogant to believe in something I couldn't see or touch. I didn't think that certain stories could happen to me or anyone close to me. But boy, was I right about one thing. High school did change my life, in ways I never thought it could. It began innocently enough. My freshman year of high school, I still believed in normal world problems like exam stress, friendship breakups, and the heart-wrenching pain of unrequited love. By the end of my sophomore year, however, I had found myself wrapped in the inexplicable layers of fear. Sophomore year was also the year of the infamous high school lockdown. I can still clearly see the chaos and panic on my fellow students and teachers. The whole school had been ordered to shelter in place. The broadcast had whistled for everyone to stay quiet, for there was a reported sighting of a person walking around the school's halls with a taser. My heart was racing as the realization of an unknown menace escalating hit me hard. We were instructed to hide under our desks in complete silence with the lights turned off. Our history teacher, Mr. Harust, informed us that to keep ourselves updated, he would turn on the projector. So there we were, 28 young teenagers hiding under the tables, sweat beads forming on our skin while trying to distinguish the whirling of fear in our systems. But an attempted quiz and a history lesson wasn't enough to distract us from our continuous thoughts of the impending danger looming around. Suddenly, I heard something slamming onto the ground from inside a classroom next to our room. I tried to disregard what had just happened, but then the sounds started getting louder and closer. The footsteps got louder by each second, as the air of fear every time a student held their breath filled the room. We were a timid bunch, terrified but still robotic in our sudden desire to stay quiet and wait for the distress calls. A teacher's message informed us that the person on report. I never found out who the taser-wielding person was. They were never caught. But something about that day changed me. It's as if my walls had been shattered and I'd become more aware of my own mortality. It made me realize that life can change in an instant, without warning. It was barely a week after the lockdown when all of my school's departments received notifications that there was going to be a PTA address. Some parents hadn't received a follow-up about the ordeal their kids had to go through, and the PTA's moniker had them in some sort of pretentious thinking. Finally, somebody is being held responsible, someone said in the hallway. I hope they fire the head of the security. What kind of school lets an invader take more than an hour in their premise? These kinds of statements won't mark a golden ending just being granted the closure, though, I figured. The atmosphere was anything but friendly. There were narrowed eyes, ugly sneers, and the overall tension gave off a peculiar haze of unease and dread, which I couldn't identify. At some point during the presentation, everyone started whispering when the principal got up to speak. There's been an accident. The words left the transceiver, and deafening silence answered back. I've just received the news. There's been an accident at one of the science labs on the 4th floor, an experiment gone awry. Her voice trembled. No survivors, students or otherwise. We can't do much now except offer our sympathies. She trailed off. There was a pause. Then chaos erupted. Students and parents alike started yelling and crying in tandem. The situation literally was unthinkable. Yet here I was, watching it all unfold right in front of me. You could hear the murmurings from all over. That's where David's exam was. He's dead? I heard Haley had robotics class then. What if her particles were included? How can this happen? How can both incidents meet a week apart? No one walked out of the doubleheaders without losing something, or someone. It happened too quickly for me to comfort anyone except myself. There are moments,